Get out and take your trash bags with you. That is the last thing my husband said before locking me out in the pouring rain. I was homeless, shivering, and holding nothing but a wet cardboard box of clothes. Desperate and hungry, I walked into a bank to use the rusty metal card my late father, a simple barber from the South Side, had left me in his old wallet. I expected maybe $50 enough for a motel room and a hot meal. Instead, the branch manager turned pale, locked the front doors, and whispered, "Ma'am, do you have any idea what you are holding?" I nearly fainted when I saw the screen. Before I tell you how I bought the company that fired me and evicted my husband from his own mansion, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. My name is Nia, and 30 minutes before my life fell apart, I was standing in the chef's kitchen of a $3 million estate in Buckhead, Atlanta. The air was thick with the rich, savory scent of slow-roasted ribs, collard greens, and caramelized yams. I had been up since 4 in the morning chopping, seasoning, and stewing. This was supposed to be a celebration. It was my mother-in-law Patricia's 60th birthday, and I wanted everything to be perfect. I wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand, careful not to mess up the plating. I was the wife of Terrence, the CEO of Future Tech, one of the hottest startups in the city, but in this house I often felt more like the hired help than the lady of the manor. Suddenly, the double doors to the kitchen swung open with a violent bang. Tiffany, my brother-in-law's wife, stormed in. The click-clack of her heels on the marble floor sounded like gunfire. Tiffany was a petite blonde woman who wore her wealth like a weapon. She was dressed in a vintage Chanel gown that likely cost more than my first car. She stopped in the middle of the room, her nose wrinkling as if she had just stepped into a sewer. "Oh my God! Nia, are you serious right now?" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the stainless steel appliances. She pointed a manicured finger at a tiny, almost invisible droplet of barbecue sauce that had landed near the island. I rushed over with a rag. "I am so sorry, Tiffany. I was just plating the ribs and it must have splattered. Let me get that." "Do not touch it," she snapped, stepping back as if I were contagious. "You are making the entire downstairs smell like a grease trap. This is a black tie event for senators and investors, not a neighborhood block party in the ghetto. Do you want the smell of cheap pork to cling to my Dior dress?" I flinched. It was not the first time Tiffany had made a comment like that. She loved to remind everyone that while Terrence and his family had climbed the social ladder to the elite circles of Atlanta, I was still just Nia from the South Side, the daughter of a barber and a school lunch lady. "This is Patricia's favorite meal," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She specifically asked for her mother's recipes." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "She asked for that when it was just family. Tonight we have investors coming. People who matter. We cannot have them thinking we eat like this." She walked over to the counter where I had laid out the platter of cornbread. With a casual flick of her hand, she shoved the silver tray. It slid across the marble and crashed onto the floor. Golden crumbs scattered everywhere, mixing with the spilled sauce. "Oops," she said, her face devoid of any apology. "Looks like you have a mess to clean up. Better get on your knees and scrub it before the guests arrive. We cannot have the floor sticky when Senator Davis walks in." My hands trembled as I looked at the ruined food. I had spent 2 hours getting that cornbread perfect. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to get out of my kitchen, but I bit my tongue. I always bit my tongue. I did it for Terrence. I did it to keep the peace. I knelt down and began picking up the pieces of bread, my knees aching against the hard stone. Just then, the side door opened. It was Patricia, my mother-in-law. She was adjusting a diamond earring, looking regal in a floor-length silver gown. I looked up, hoping for a savior. Hoping she would see Tiffany standing over me, smirking while I cleaned up her mess. Hoping she would defend me. "Patricia, look," Tiffany said, her voice instantly transforming into a sweet, concerned whine. Nia dropped the food everywhere. "The smell is overwhelming." I tried to tell her this menu was too heavy for a cocktail hour. Patricia looked down at me. She did not offer a hand to help me up. She did not ask if I was okay. She just sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion and disappointment. Nia, honestly, Patricia said, checking her reflection in the oven door. We have VIPs arriving in 15 minutes. I cannot believe you are down on the floor making a scene. I stood up, brushing crumbs from my apron. Mom Tiffany pushed the tray. And this is the food you asked for. I made it exactly how you like it. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Plans change, Nia. We need to project an image of sophistication tonight. Terrence is announcing his IPO soon. We cannot have the house smelling like a soul food kitchen. It sends the wrong message. The wrong message. The words cut deep. For 10 years, I had supported Terrence. I had worked 2 jobs while he coded in our basement. I had used my own credit score to secure the loan for his first server. But now that he was successful, now that they lived in Buckhead, my history, my culture, and my effort were just the wrong message. Fine, I said, my voice tight. I will throw it out. I will put out the catered hors d'oeuvres. Good, Patricia said. And Nia, look at you. I looked down. I was wearing a simple but elegant navy dress under my apron. It was modest, but it was tailored and clean. What is wrong with my dress? I asked. It is just a bit plain, Patricia said, wrinkling her nose. You look like you are going to a church potluck. Standing next to Tiffany and me, you are going to stick out. You know how the press is. They will think you are part of the staff. Tiffany giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. Actually, that gives me an idea, Patricia said, snapping her fingers. One of the catering servers called in sick. We are short-handed for the champagne service. Since you are already making a mess in the kitchen, why don't you just help out? I stared at her. You want me to serve drinks? At my husband's company party? At your birthday? It would really help the family, Nia. Patricia said, her voice taking on that manipulative edge I knew so well. Unless you want Terrence to look bad because his guests had empty glasses. There is a spare uniform in the pantry. Black pants, white shirt. It should fit you. You have put on a little weight lately anyway, so the loose fit will be flattering. I felt tears pricking the corners of my eyes. This was a new low. They did not just want to hide me. They wanted to put me in a uniform. They wanted to erase my status as Terrence's wife completely. I am not wearing a uniform, Patricia, I said, my voice shaking. I am the hostess of this party. You are the hostess when you pay the mortgage, Tiffany interjected, inspecting her nails. Until then, you are just living in Terrence's house. Be useful for once. Patricia looked at her watch. Stop arguing. The senator is pulling into the driveway. Nia, go change. Now. Do not come out until you are holding a tray of champagne. And fix your hair, it looks frizzy. She turned on her heel and walked out, Tiffany following close behind like a loyal lapdog. I was left alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of the meal I had made with love. I looked at the uniform hanging on the pantry door. It was a cheap polyester button-down and baggy black trousers. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab my keys and drive away. But I thought of Terrence. He had been so stressed about this IPO. He told me this night could make or break the company. If I caused a scene, if I wasn't there to support him, he would never forgive me. I told myself I could swallow my pride one more time. Just one more time for the man I loved. I went into the pantry and changed. The shirt scratched my skin. The pants were too long. I tied my hair back into a severe bun, trying to hide the texture my mother-in-law hated so much. I looked in the reflection of the window. I did not look like the wife of a CEO. I looked like a ghost. I took a deep breath, grabbed a silver tray, and loaded it with crystal champagne flutes. I pushed open the kitchen doors and stepped into the grand foyer. The party was in full swing. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns laughed and clinked glasses. The chandelier sparkled overhead, casting a warm glow on everyone. Everyone except me. I moved through the crowd, offering drinks, keeping my head down. I felt invisible. People took glasses from my tray without making eye contact, continuing their conversations as if I were a piece of furniture. Then the heavy oak front doors opened. The room went silent. It was Terrence. My heart leaped. My husband was here. He would fix this. He would see me in this ridiculous uniform and tell his mother she had gone too far. He would take the tray from my hands and tell everyone that I was his wife, his partner, his equal. Terrence stepped into the light. He looked incredible in a custom-made midnight blue tuxedo. He exuded power and confidence, but he was not alone. Linked through his arm was a woman. She was young, maybe 22. Her skin was flawless, glowing under the lights. She wore a red silk dress that clung to every curve with a slit that went up to her thigh. She was stunning. She looked like everything Patricia and Tiffany wanted me to be. Terrence smiled at the crowd, a dazzling, camera-ready smile. He patted the woman's hand resting on his arm. "Good evening, everyone," he announced, his voice booming with charisma. "Thank you for coming. I want to introduce you to someone very special. This is Jasmine. She is the new strategic investor for Future Tech." The room erupted in applause. Tiffany clapped the loudest, whispering something to Patricia, who beamed with approval. I stood frozen near the staircase, the heavy silver tray trembling in my hands. Strategic investor. I knew the company's finances better than anyone. I had never heard the name Jasmine. I had never seen a term sheet for her. Terrence guided Jasmine into the room. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear, and she threw her head back, laughing a musical, intimate laugh. It was a look of intimacy I had not seen from him in years. He walked right past me. He looked directly at me. I saw his eyes flicker over my waiter's uniform, over my pulled-back hair, over the tray in my hands. For a split second our eyes locked. I waited for the recognition. I waited for the outrage. Instead, he looked away. He looked right through me, as if I were exactly what his mother said I was. Just the help. He turned his attention back to Jasmine, placing a hand possessively on the small of her back as he led her toward the bar. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces right there in the foyer. The champagne glasses rattled on my tray. I realized then that the uniform was not just a costume, it was my reality. To them, I had no value beyond what I could serve. And my husband, the man I had built from nothing, had just replaced me in front of the entire city. The applause in the grand foyer was deafening, a wave of adoration washing over Terrence as he stood on the sweeping staircase. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom, the crystal chandelier casting a halo around his freshly trimmed fade. I stood in the shadows near the kitchen door, my hands cramping around the silver tray of empty champagne flutes. My feet ached in the cheap service shoes Patricia had forced me to wear, but my heart was racing with a desperate, foolish hope. This was it. This was the moment. He was announcing the IPO. Future Tech was going public. All those nights I stayed up helping him debug code, all the double shifts I worked to pay for the servers, the credit cards I maxed out to keep the lights on during the lean years, it was all for this. Surely now that he had made it, he would acknowledge me. He would tell these senators and socialites that he didn't do it alone. Terrence raised a glass of vintage Dom Perignon, the liquid gold catching the light. He flashed that $1,000,000 smile, the one that had charmed me 10 years ago when he was just a broke student with a dream. To Future Tech, he boomed his voice rich and commanding. "We are about to change the world. But no man builds an empire alone." My breath hitched. I took a half step forward, ready to step out of the shadows. I smoothed the front of my ill-fitting waiter's uniform. It didn't matter what I was wearing. I was his wife. I was his partner. "I want to propose a toast," Terrence continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. "To the inspiration behind my success. To the woman who embodies the future of this company. The woman who stands beside me not just as a supporter, but as a symbol of where we are going." The room went silent. I saw Patricia in this front row clutching her pearls, a smug smile plastered on her face. Tiffany was whispering something to her husband, giggling. I looked at Terrence, willing him to find my eyes. To Jasmine, he said, turning his body toward the woman in the red dress standing next to him. The air left my lungs as if I had been punched. Jasmine. The girl he had just met. The girl who was barely older than our relationship. Terrence wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her close. Jasmine smiled a practiced camera-ready expression and raised her glass. Then in front of everyone, his mother, his investors, his employees, and his wife, he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was a claim, a passionate, lingering kiss that signaled possession and intimacy. The room erupted in polite applause and cheers. Flashbulbs popped, blinding me. I felt like the floor was dissolving beneath my feet. I dropped the tray. The sound of crystals shattering against the marble floor rang out like a gunshot, cutting through the applause. The room fell deadly silent. All heads turned toward the help. Terrence broke the kiss and looked up, annoyance flashing across his face. When he saw it was me, his expression didn't soften. It hardened into something cold and unrecognizable. "Excuse me for a moment," he said smoothly to the crowd, his charm not faltering for a second. "Just a minor housekeeping issue." He strode across the room, grabbing my arm with a grip that was tight enough to bruise. He didn't say a word as he dragged me out of the foyer, past the staring guests and down the hallway to his private study. He shoved me inside and slammed the heavy oak door, locking it with a click that echoed in the sudden silence. The study was magnificent, lined with mahogany bookshelves and smelling of expensive leather and ambition. It was a room I had decorated, a room paid for with the bonus from my second job 3 years ago. Terrence walked over to his massive desk and picked up a thick manila envelope. He turned to face me, his face devoid of the warmth he had just shown that stranger. "You embarrassed me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You dropped a tray in front of Senator Davis. Do you have any idea how clumsy and low-class that looks?" I stared at him, tears streaming down my face. "I embarrassed you. You just kissed another woman in front of the entire city. You toasted her as the key to your success. I am your wife, Terrence. I built this company with you. I fed you when we had nothing." "That is the past, Nia," he snapped, throwing the envelope onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of me. "This is the future." I looked down. The document peeking out of the envelope was titled Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. Divorce papers. "What is this?" I whispered, my hands shaking so hard I could barely touch the paper. "It is exactly what it looks like," Terrence said, leaning back against his desk and crossing his arms. "I am filing for divorce. My lawyers drafted this weeks ago. I was going to wait until after the IPO launched, but your little stunt in the kitchen with Tiffany, and now this mess in the foyer, forced my hand. Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Is it because of her, Jasmine?" "It is not just about her, Nia. It is about us. Or rather, it is about you." He sighed, looking at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. "Look at yourself. You are wearing a waiter's uniform. Your hair is frizzy. You have barbecue sauce under your fingernails." "You made me wear this," I screamed. "Your mother made me work the party. Because that is where you fit, Nia," he shouted back. "Do you not get it? You are a worker. You are a grinder. You were great when we were struggling in the hood. You were great when I needed someone to count pennies and manage the books in the background. But I am a CEO now. I am about to be the face of a billion-dollar tech unicorn. I need a wife who matches that energy." He walked over to a mirror hanging on the wall and adjusted his tie. "I need a brand, Nia. Jasmine is a model. She has a degree in art history from the Sorbonne. She speaks French. She knows how to walk in heels without tripping. She is an asset. You are a liability. You are too plain, too domestic, too basic." I felt like I was suffocating. The man I had sacrificed everything for was telling me I was being fired from my own marriage because I didn't fit the brand image. "I am not signing these," I said, pushing the papers away. "I am not letting you throw me away like garbage. I own half of everything, Terrence. Half of this house, half of the company. Georgia is an equitable distribution state. You can't just replace me." Terrence laughed. It was a cruel, dry sound. "Oh, Nia, you really should read the things you sign. What are you talking about? Remember 6 months ago when we refinanced the house to get the capital for the expansion? You signed a stack of documents. You trusted me. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Yes. You said it was for the business loan. It was, he said, smiling. But buried in that stack was a quitclaim deed. You signed over your rights to this property. And the company, the initial incorporation papers listed you as a silent partner, but the restructuring agreement you signed last year converted your equity into non-voting stock with a buyback clause triggered by divorce. I can buy you out for pennies on the dollar. My knees gave out. I grabbed the back of a leather chair to keep from falling. He had planned this. He had been planning this for months, maybe years. While I was cooking his meals and washing his clothes, he was legally erasing me from our life. You tricked me, I whispered. You stole everything from me. I did what I had to do to protect the asset, he said coldly. Now pick up a pen and sign the divorce papers. If you sign now, I will give you $5,000 cash to help you get set up in an apartment. If you fight me, I will drag this out in court until you are bankrupt and living under a bridge. I looked at the pen lying on the desk. It was a Mont Blanc I had bought him for our 5th anniversary. I looked at the man standing before me. He wasn't the Terrence I knew. He was a stranger in a tuxedo. No, I said, straightening my spine. I will not sign, and I am not leaving my house. It is not your house, Nia, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. It is my house, and if you don't sign, you are trespassing. He walked over to the door and unlocked it. Get out, he said. I am not going anywhere. I said, though my voice trembled. Fine, he said. Have it your way. He grabbed my arm again, rougher this time. He dragged me out of the study and toward the back service entrance. Terrence, stop! I yelled, trying to pull away. He ignored me. He opened the back door. Outside, the sky had opened up. Rain was pouring down in sheets, thundering against the pavement. A crack of lightning illuminated the backyard. He shoved me. I stumbled over the threshold and fell onto the wet concrete of the patio. The rain soaked through my thin waiter's shirt in seconds. I gasped the cold water, shocking my system. He threw the cardboard box of my old clothes, the ones I had packed away in the garage, out after me. It landed in a puddle water, immediately seeping into the cardboard. You want to act like trash? Then stay outside with the trash, he spat. Do not come back until you are ready to sign. He slammed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I was alone in the dark, in the rain, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a box of soggy memories. I pounded on the door, screaming his name, but the music from the party inside was already drowning me out. I was locked out of the life I had built, while inside my husband was celebrating his future with the woman who fit the brand. The rain was not just falling, it was punishing me, hammering against my skin like icy needles as I scrambled to gather the few belongings that had spilled from the soggy cardboard box. My old college sweatshirts, a pair of worn sneakers, and a framed photo of my father lay scattered on the wet pavement, soaking up the muddy water. I fell to my knees, scraping them against the rough concrete, trying to shield the photo frame with my body. But the glass was already cracked, a spiderweb fracture right over my father's smiling face. It felt like an omen, like the last sturdy thing in my life had finally broken under the weight of my husband's betrayal. The music from inside the mansion was muffled now, a heavy bass thumping that sounded like a heartbeat mocking me from the warmth I was no longer allowed to enter. I reached for a soaking wet hoodie, trying to wring it out, when a beam of harsh white light blinded me. I squinted, raising a hand to shield my eyes, thinking perhaps Terrence had come to his senses and turned on the patio floodlights to help me. But the light was moving, dancing around me with a predatory jerkiness. I blinked against the glare and saw Tiffany standing under the covered awning of the service entrance. She was perfectly dry, her Chanel gown untouched by the storm, holding her latest model smartphone steadily directed at me. The light was from her camera flash, and the little red dot indicated she was live. Look at this, you guys, Tiffany said, her voice pitched high and theatrical for her digital audience. I told you all the charity case wouldn't last. Look at her down in the mud where she belongs. It is so sad, really, when people try to climb out of their station. This is what happens when the help forgets they are the help. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the wet box to my chest, trying to turn my face away from the camera. But Tiffany stepped closer, staying just under the shelter of the overhang while zooming in on my misery. "Say hi to the girls, Nia," she taunted. "Everyone is watching. We are having a little bet on where you are going to sleep tonight. My money is on a park bench, but Sarah thinks you might crawl back to whatever ghetto Terrence plucked you from." "Tiffany, please stop," I begged, my voice barely audible over the thunder. "I just need to get my things." "Oh, look, she is crying." Tiffany laughed, reading comments scrolling on her screen. "Someone just commented that the spell has broken and Cinderella is being returned to the ashes. That is exactly it. The pumpkin carriage is gone, honey. You are just a pumpkin now." The back door opened again, and Terrence stepped out. He was holding a large umbrella over his head, protecting his tuxedo from even a single drop of rain. In his hand, he dangled a set of keys. For a fleeting second, I thought he was bringing me the keys to my car, the white Range Rover I had driven for the past 3 years. It was the car I used to drive him to meetings, the car I used to pick up his dry cleaning, the car I thought was mine. He stopped beside Tiffany, glancing at her phone screen and seeing himself. He smoothed his lapel, flashing a quick, charming smile for the livestream before turning his cold, dead eyes toward me. "I need the fob for the Rover, Nia," he said, extending his hand palm up. I stared at him, rainwater dripping from my nose. "That is my car, Terrence. It is in my name." "Actually, it is in the company name," he corrected me, his tone bored. "Another asset protection measure. And since you are no longer an employee or a shareholder of FutureTech as of 20 minutes ago, you have no authorization to operate company vehicles. Hand it over." I reached into my pocket, my fingers numb and fumbling. I pulled out the heavy leather key fob. It felt warm in my hand, the last piece of my life that felt substantial. He snatched it from me without touching my skin, as if contact with me would tarnish him. He dropped something else into my hand. It was a single jagged metal key attached to a faded plastic tag. I looked down at it, confused. It was the key to my old Honda Civic, the car I had driven in college, the car that had been sitting under a tarp in the back of the property for 5 years. It had over 200,000 miles on it and no air conditioning. "I kept it around for hauling garden supplies," Terrence said, turning the Range Rover fob over in his hand. "It still runs, I think. Consider it a severance package. It is more than you deserve after the scene you caused tonight." "You cannot do this," I whispered. "That car might not even make it to the main road." "Then you better start walking," he said. "Oh, and one more thing." He pulled out his smartphone and tapped the screen a few times. A notification pinged on my phone, which was buried somewhere in my wet pocket. "I just canceled the supplementary platinum card," he said, casually showing me the screen. "And I froze the joint checking account pending the divorce litigation. My lawyer advised me to secure all liquid assets to prevent you from dissipating marital funds, so do not bother trying to buy a hotel room on my dime. You are on your own." I reached for my phone, desperate to check my own banking app, but my wet fingers slipped on the screen. When I finally got it open, the zeros stared back at me. Account frozen. Card declined. Access denied. I had nothing. No cash, no credit, no access to the money I had helped him earn. Tiffany laughed again, a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the rain. "Oh my God, did you see her face?" she said to her phone. She really thought she was going to go shopping on Terrence's black card. "The entitlement is real, folks. Get off my property," Nia Terrence said, turning back toward the warmth of the house. "If you are still here in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police and having you arrested for trespassing. And trust me, after the stunt you pulled tonight, the officers will be more than happy to remove a hysterical woman from my premises." He put his arm around Tiffany and guided her back inside. She blew a kiss to the camera before the heavy door slammed shut, leaving me in total darkness. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound in the world. I stood there for a moment, the rain washing away the last of my dignity. I was shivering violently now, my teeth chattering. I looked at the rusty key in my hand. It was the only thing I had left. I walked around the side of the house, dragging my wet box of clothes through the mud. The old Honda was parked behind the shed, covered in a layer of grime and dead leaves. I had to use my sleeve to wipe the mud off the driver's side window just to see inside. It smelled like mildew and stale gasoline. I threw the box into the passenger seat and climbed in. The vinyl seat was cold and hard. I put the key in the ignition and turned it. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. Please, I begged, hitting the steering wheel. Please, just start. I tried again. The engine whined a high-pitched protest against being woken from its long sleep. I pumped the gas pedal, praying to a god I wasn't sure was listening anymore. Finally, with a cloud of black smoke and a violent shudder, the car roared to life. The check engine light glowed an ominous red on the dashboard, and the gas needle hovered just above empty. I put the car in gear and it lurched forward, the suspension groaning. I drove down the long, winding driveway, passing the rows of luxury cars parked for the party: Mercedes, Bentleys, Porsches, and me in my rattling, rusting Honda. As I reached the security gates at the end of the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror. The mansion was glowing on the hill, a beacon of wealth and power. I could see silhouettes moving in the windows, people dancing, drinking, celebrating. My husband was in there, probably raising another glass to his freedom. Tiffany was in there, showing her friends the video of me on my knees in the mud. I hated them. I hated them with a clarity that was terrifying. But beneath the hate was a crushing wave of fear. I turned onto the main road, the windshield wipers smearing the rain rather than clearing it. I had no money. I had no home. I had no family to call. My father was dead, and my mother had passed when I was a teenager. I was completely alone in a city that worshipped money, and I didn't have a single cent to my name. I drove aimlessly for miles, my tears mixing with the condensation on the windows. The gaslight flickered on a warning that my time was running out. I needed shelter. I needed food. I needed a miracle. And then I remembered the wallet. My father's old leather wallet tucked into the glove compartment of this very car years ago. He had told me to keep it for an emergency. I reached over and popped the glove box open. It fell open with a clatter, spilling old registration papers and tire gauges. And there it was, cracked brown leather, dusty and forgotten. I grabbed it with trembling fingers. I didn't know what I expected to find. Maybe a $20 bill he had stashed away. Maybe just old receipts. I pulled over under a flickering street lamp near a closed gas station. I opened the wallet. It was empty of cash. My heart sank. But tucked into the back flap behind a picture of me as a little girl was a card. It wasn't a credit card. It was heavy, made of black metal with no numbers on the front, just a gold chip and my father's signature etched in silver. Otis Williams. I stared at it. My father was a barber. He cut hair for $20 a head. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment his whole life. What was this? It looked like a prop, a toy, but it felt cold and substantial in my hand. I had nothing else, no other options. The gas gauge was on E. My stomach was cramping with hunger. I looked up and saw a bank across the street, the ATM lobby lights glowing in the dark. It was a long shot. It was probably nothing. But it was the only chance I had. I put the car in gear and drove across the street. I didn't know it then, but as I stepped out of that car into the rain, clutching that mysterious metal card, I wasn't just walking into a bank. I was walking into a new life. And Terrence and Tiffany were about to learn that they had made a very, very expensive mistake. The cold woke me up before the sun did. It was a bone-deep chill that seeped through the thin vinyl of the car seat and settled into my marrow. I curled tighter into a ball, pulling my knees to my chest, trying to preserve whatever body heat I had left, but the old Honda Civic was little more than a metal icebox. My breath fogged the windows, creating a barrier between me and the harsh reality of the Walmart parking lot. I wiped a circle on the glass and peered out. The world was gray and bleak. A few RVs were parked in the distance, their curtains drawn tight, and a security patrol car was making its slow rounds, its yellow lights flashing in the dawn mist. I ducked down, terrified that the guard would see me, knock on the window, and tell me to move along. I was the wife of a tech CEO yesterday. Today I was a vagrant hiding in a 24-hour parking lot. My stomach gave a violent twist, a sharp reminder that I hadn't eaten since a piece of toast at 4 the previous morning. The hunger was a physical pain, a cramping hollowness that made my hands shake. I looked at the dashboard clock, 6:30 in the morning. My mouth tasted like copper and despair. I sat up, my joints popping, and caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back. My hair was escaping its bun in frizzy tendrils, my eyes were swollen shut from crying, and there was a smudge of dirt on my cheek from when I had fallen in the driveway. I looked like everything Tiffany had said I was. Broken. Worthless. I reached for the glove compartment again, needing to hold on to something that felt like love. I pulled out my father's wallet. It was worn soft at the edges, the leather cracked from years of being in his back pocket while he stood on his feet for 10 hours a day. I opened it and inhaled deeply. The scent was faint, but it was there. Bay rum, talcum powder, and peppermint, the smell of Otis's barbershop. I closed my eyes and I was back there. The checkered linoleum floor, the hum of electric clippers, the sound of old jazz playing low on the radio. My father Otis was a giant of a man with hands that were rough as sandpaper, but gentle enough to trim a baby's hair without waking him. He wasn't a rich man, or at least that is what I had always believed. We lived in a small house in the Bankhead neighborhood. He drove a truck that was older than I was. He wore the same gray work shirts every day. I remembered the day I brought Terrence home to meet him. It was 10 years ago. Terrence had been flashy even then, wearing a knockoff designer belt and talking loud about his big plans to disrupt the tech industry. My father had sat in his barber chair snapping a towel, watching Terrence with eyes that saw everything. Later, when Terrence had gone outside to take a phone call, my father had turned to me. He dusted the hair off his shoulders and looked me dead in the eye. "That boy is Paint Nia," he had said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "What do you mean, Daddy?" I had asked, defensive. "I mean he is all surface. He shines real nice when the light hits him, but there is no foundation. You scratch the surface, and there is nothing underneath but drywall and rot." "Daddy, stop," I had argued. "He is going to be successful. He has vision." "Vision is cheap," Otis had said. "Character is expensive. Do not let the pretty paint fool you, baby girl. Value isn't what you see on the outside. Real value is in the foundation. It is in the land. It is in the things that don't move when the storm comes." I had ignored him. I thought he was just an old man who didn't understand the modern world. I thought he was jealous of Terrence's ambition. Now, sitting in a freezing car with no home and no husband, I realized my father had been the smartest man I ever knew. He saw the rot in Terrence before I even saw the shine. I looked down at the wallet in my hands. It was the only thing he had left me when he passed away from a sudden heart attack 4 years ago. I had been so busy building future tech with Terrence that I hadn't even properly mourned him. I had just taken the wallet, thrown it in the glove box, and promised myself I would go through it later. Later had taken 4 years to arrive. I opened the billfold. Empty. No cash. Just a few receipts from the hardware store and a picture of my mother who died when I was 12. I ran my thumb over her face, feeling a fresh wave of grief. Then I noticed the hidden slot behind the ID window. There was something tucked deep inside, something stiff. I used my fingernail to pry it out. It slid free and landed in my lap. It was a card, but not like any card I had ever seen. It was heavy, cold to the touch, made of solid black metal. There were no embossed numbers, no expiration date, no bank logo. On the front, there was only a small, intricate gold chip and my father's signature, Otis Williams, engraved in silver script. On the back, there was a magnetic strip and a single phone number printed in small gold font. I turned it over in my hands. It felt significant, substantial, but it made no sense. My father didn't have credit cards. He paid cash for everything. He didn't trust banks. He kept his savings in a coffee can under the sink, or so I thought. What was this? Was it a membership card to some club? A commemorative item? My stomach growled loud and painful. I didn't care what it was. I just hoped it was connected to an account with $20 in it. Just enough for a breakfast sandwich and a large coffee. I needed caffeine if I was going to figure out how to survive. I looked out the window. Across the parking lot beyond the highway overpass, I saw the skyline of downtown Atlanta rising into the morning mist. And right at the edge of the shopping center was a branch of Sovereign Capital Bank, the largest and most exclusive bank in the city. Terrence banked there. I had been there with him once to sign papers, feeling small and out of place in the marble lobby while he joked with the bankers. It was a long shot. A desperate, foolish long shot. But I had the key to a car with no gas, and a stomach that was eating itself. I had to try. I waited until 8:30 when the bank opened its doors. I tried to fix my hair in the rearview mirror, smoothing down the flyaways with spit, trying to look less like a woman who had slept in her car. I brushed the dried mud off my pants as best I could. I grabbed the black card and stepped out into the morning chill. The walk across the parking lot felt like a march to the gallows. My legs were weak and my head felt light. As I approached the bank, I saw the security guard standing by the glass doors. He was tall with a stern face, his arms crossed over his chest. He watched me approach, his eyes scanning my wrinkled clothes, my dirty shoes, the desperation in my walk. I kept my head high, channeling whatever dignity I had left. I am Nia Williams, I told myself. I am worthy. I reached the door. The guard took a step forward, blocking my path. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his tone making it clear he didn't think I had any business being there. "The lobby is for customers only. I am a customer." I lied, my voice raspy. "I need to make a withdrawal." "Do you have an account here?" he asked, looking skeptical. I held up the black metal card. It caught the morning sun glinting with a strange, dark luster. "I have this," I said. The guard looked at the card. He frowned. He had clearly never seen one like it. He looked back at me, assessing the disconnect between the expensive-looking piece of metal and the woman holding it. "Please," I said softly. "I just need to use the ATM in the lobby." He hesitated, then stepped aside, likely deciding it wasn't worth the hassle of an argument. "The ATM is on the right," he muttered. I walked past him, the cool air conditioning of the bank hitting my face. The lobby was quiet, smelling of money and floor wax. I walked to the ATM in the corner, my heart hammering against my ribs. I inserted the heavy black card into the slot. The machine whirred. It made a mechanical chunking sound. I waited for the screen to ask for a PIN. I didn't know the PIN. I hadn't even thought about that. Panic flared in my chest. If it asked for a code, I was done. But it didn't ask for a PIN. Instead, the screen went black for a terrifying second. Then it flashed a bright, alarming red. Bold white letters appeared on the screen. "System alert. Do not remove card. See branch manager immediately. Code 0. My breath hitched. Code 0. Was that bad? Was it a stolen card? Had my father found this somewhere? Was I about to be arrested? The machine started beeping, a loud, rhythmic tone that echoed through the silent lobby. Every head turned. The tellers behind the glass looked up. The security guard turned around, his hand moving to his belt. "Misstep away from the machine," the guard barked, walking toward me. I tried to pull the card out, but the machine had swallowed it. I couldn't leave it. It was all I had. I tugged at the slot, panic rising. "I can't," I said. It took my card. Suddenly, a door in the back of the bank flew open. A man in a pristine gray suit ran out. He wasn't walking, he was running. He looked frantic. He spotted me at the ATM, the red light flashing on the screen, and his face went completely pale. "Stop!" he shouted at the guard. "Do not touch her." He rushed over to me, breathless, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the card slot. He pulled a key from his pocket, inserted it into the machine, and manually ejected the card. He caught it in his hand as if it were a holy relic. He looked at the signature on the front. Otis. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and something that looked like fear. "Ma'am," he said, his voice trembling, "please come with me, right now. We need to get you into the vault. This isn't safe out here." I stared at him, confused and terrified. "I just wanted $20, I whispered. $20, he repeated, looking at me like I was insane. "Ma'am, do you have any idea what you are holding?" He didn't wait for an answer. He ushered me toward the heavy steel door in the back, the guard now following us with a confused expression. I didn't know what was happening, but as I walked past the tellers and into the depths of the bank, I had a feeling that my father, the humble barber from the South Side, had been keeping a secret that was about to change the world. The heavy oak door of the manager's office clicked shut, sealing out the hum of the lobby and the curious stares of the customers. The silence inside was instant and thick, smelling of lemon polish and old money. I stood by the door, dripping rainwater onto a Persian rug that probably cost more than my entire tuition. I hugged my arms around my chest, shivering not just from the cold, but from a terrifying certainty that I was about to be arrested. The man in the gray suit, whose nameplate on the desk read Arthur Sterling, Branch Director, was pacing behind his desk, holding my father's black metal card with a white handkerchief as if he were handling a radioactive isotope. A young woman in a crisp blazer burst into the room without knocking. She glared at me with undisguised disgust, her eyes raking over my mud-stained pants and my frizzy, wet hair. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice sharp and urgent. "I have security on the line. The silent alarm at the ATM was triggered. Do you want me to have them escort this woman out the back, or should we hold her until the police arrive? She is clearly distressed, and that card is obviously a forgery. We have no record of any account type that uses that hardware." I shrank back against the wall. This was it. I was going to jail. I would be the crazy homeless woman who tried to scam a bank with a fake card. I looked at Mr. Sterling, waiting for him to nod, waiting for the handcuffs. Instead, Mr. Sterling slammed his hand down on the desk. It was a violent, sudden sound that made both me and the assistant jump. "Cancel the call." "Sarah," he barked, his face flushed. "And if you ever speak about a guest of this bank with that tone again, you will be looking for employment elsewhere. This is not a police matter. This is a Code Zero. Do you understand me, Code Zero?" The woman's mouth fell open. She looked from him to me, her arrogance evaporating into confusion. "Code Zero. But sir, that protocol hasn't been used in—" "Get out," Sterling commanded, pointing at the door. "And bring us water, the Crystal Service. Now." She fled the room, closing the door softly this time. "Mr." Sterling took a deep breath, adjusting his tie, and turned to me. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was awe. It was the look a religious man might give if he suddenly found an angel standing in his living room, even if that angel was covered in mud. "Please, Mrs. Williams, sit down," he said, gesturing to a leather wingback chair. "I apologize for the reception. We simply were not expecting you. We didn't think this card would ever be activated." I sat down gingerly, afraid I would stain the leather. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's just my dad's old card. He was a barber. I just needed $20 for food. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Sterling walked around the desk and sat on the edge of it, bringing himself down to my eye level. He looked at the card in his hand, tracing the signature with his thumb. "Your father was Otis Williams," he said softly, "the owner of Otis's barbershop on Martin Luther King Drive." "Yes," I said, tears welling up again. "He passed away 4 years ago." "I know," Sterling said. "I was at his funeral. I stood in the back. You wouldn't have seen me. There were too many people." I blinked. "You knew my father, Nia? May I call you Nia?" he asked. I nodded. "Nia, your father was not just a barber. That shop was his office, yes. It was where he held court. but it was not his livelihood. He stood up and walked over to a large map of Atlanta framed on the wall behind his desk. It was a zoning map color-coded by district. He pointed to a large swath of the downtown area encompassing the financial district, the new tech corridor, and the historic neighborhoods that were currently being gentrified at lightning speed. In the late 1960s and early 70s, after the riots and during the White Flight when everyone was selling their property for pennies on the dollar to get out of the city your father was buying, Sterling said. He bought vacant lots. He bought abandoned warehouses. He bought apartment buildings that had been condemned. He bought them through shell companies and trusts, so no one would know a black man from the South Side was acquiring the city's spine. I stared at the map. My father. The man who clipped coupons for groceries. The man who drove a truck until the wheels fell off. He believed in land. Sterling continued. He used to tell me, Art, they can print money, but they can't print dirt. He held on to everything. He never sold. Not 1 square inch. He leased. He entered into 99-year ground leases. Sterling turned back to me, his eyes intense. Nia, do you know the building Future Tech is headquartered in? The glass tower on Peachtree? Yes, I said. Terrence loves that building. He says it costs him $50,000 a month in rent, but it's worth it for the image. Sterling smiled a tight, secretive smile. Your husband pays $50,000 a month to a management company called OW Holdings. Do you know what OW stands for? I shook my head, my heart pounding in my ears. Otis Williams, Sterling said. Your husband has been paying rent to your father for 5 years, and now he is paying it to you. The room spun. I gripped the arms of the chair. My father owned Terrence's office building. He owns the block, Sterling corrected. He owns the land under the stadium. He owns the land under this bank branch. We pay rent to the trust. That card you handed me, that isn't a debit card, Nia. That is the master key to the Black Trust. It is a sovereign wealth fund your father set up to consolidate all his real estate holdings and liquid assets. He designed it to activate only when his heir, you physically presented the key. He wanted to make sure you were ready. He wanted to make sure you needed it. I don't believe you, I stammered. If he had all this money, why did we live like that? Why did he let me struggle? Why did he let me work 2 jobs to support Terrence? Because he was terrified, Sterling said sadly. He saw what money did to people. He saw how it ruined families. He wanted you to build your own character first. He wanted you to find a man who loved you, for you, not for the empire you would inherit. He told me once, if she marries a man who grinds with her when she has nothing, she can give him the world. But if she marries a leech, I need her to have the power to salt the earth. Salt the earth. That sounded like Daddy. Sterling walked back to his desk and sat down at his computer. He inserted the black card into a specialized card reader that looked more like a piece of military equipment than banking hardware. He typed in a sequence of codes. The Black Trust has been accumulating compounded interest and lease payments for 4 years since his death. Sterling set his fingers flying across the keyboard. It is a real estate investment trust with tax-exempt status on the accrued gains. It is substantial. He turned the monitor around so I could see. I looked at the screen. I saw a number. It was long. It had too many commas. At first, my brain refused to process it. I thought it was an account number. Is that the account number? I asked, my voice barely a squeak. Sterling shook his head. No, ma'am. That is the current liquid cash balance available for immediate withdrawal. The real estate assets are valued separately, but they are estimated at over $400 million. This is just the cash. I looked again. $680,450,000.12. I stopped breathing. The room went gray at the edges. $680 million. And I was sleeping in a car because I couldn't afford a motel. Your husband kicked you out because he thought you were poor, Sterling said quietly, watching my face. He left you for an investor because he needed capital. Nia, you are the capital. You could buy his company tomorrow morning out of petty cash and not even notice the dent in your balance. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest, but it sounded like a sob. I covered my mouth with my hands. My father. My quiet, humble father who swept hair off the floor. He had owned the city. And he had left it all to me, hidden in a glove box, waiting for the moment I was desperate enough to find it. So Sterling asked, his voice professional, but laced with a dangerous sort of excitement. "What would you like to do, Ms. Williams? Do you want that $20 for breakfast?" I looked at the screen again. I thought about Terrence in his tuxedo laughing as he threw my clothes in the mud. I thought about Tiffany live-streaming my humiliation. I thought about the divorce papers and the quitclaim deed I had foolishly signed. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. I sat up straight. I wiped the dirt from my cheek. I looked at Arthur Sterling, and for the first time in 24 hours my eyes were dry. "No, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice hardening into something new, something that sounded like Otis Williams' daughter. "I don't want breakfast. I want to see the loan documents for Future Tech. And then I want to call a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I want the shark my father used." Sterling grinned. He reached for his phone. "I have Henderson on speed dial. He has been waiting for this call for 4 years." As he dialed, I looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline rising in the distance. It looked different now. It didn't look like a fortress I was locked out of. It looked like a chessboard. And I had just been handed the queen. Terrence wanted a brand image. I was about to give him a rebranding he would never survive. The game had just changed, and they didn't even know I was playing. The door to the manager's office opened again, but this time there was no frantic energy, only a heavy, dignified silence that seemed to command the room before the man even stepped inside. Arthur Sterling immediately stood up, straightening his jacket with a reverence I had not seen him display for anyone else. The man who entered looked like he had been carved out of granite and old money. He was elderly, perhaps in his late 70s, with snow-white hair swept back from a forehead, etched with lines of shrewd intelligence. He wore a navy pinstripe suit that whispered of Savile Row tailoring, and he carried a battered leather briefcase that looked out of place against his pristine appearance, until I realized it matched the worn wallet I was still clutching in my hand. He did not look at Sterling. His pale blue eyes locked onto me, instantly softening with an emotion that looked painfully like grief. He walked straight to me, bypassing the offered hand of the bank manager, and stopped just outside my personal space. "Nia," he said, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that sounded like it had argued cases before the Supreme Court. "You have your mother's eyes. Otis always said you did, but seeing you now, it is like looking at a ghost." I stood up, feeling small in my dirty clothes next to this titan of industry. "Who are you?" "I am Elias Henderson," he said, setting the briefcase on the desk with a heavy thud. "I was your father's attorney for 40 years. I am the executor of the Black Trust, and I have been waiting for you to walk through that door since the day we buried him." Sterling poured a glass of water for the newcomer, his hands shaking slightly. Henderson sat down, unlatched the briefcase, and pulled out a thick file folder marked simply with my name. He placed it in front of me. "Your father was a brilliant man," Nia Henderson began, folding his hands over the file. "But he was also a paranoid one. He knew what money did to people. He saw it destroy his own brothers when the first land deals went through in the 80s. He swore he would never let that happen to you. He told me he was broke," I whispered, running my hand over the file. "He let me pay for his medication. He let me work double shifts at the diner to buy his tombstone." Henderson nodded, his expression grim. "That was the test. It was the hardest thing he ever did. He sat in my office and cried the day you took that second job. He wanted to give you the world, Nia, but he needed to know that you could survive without it. And more importantly, he needed to know who would stand by you when the well was dry." He looked at the empty chair next to me, the space where a husband should have been. "He knew about Terrence, didn't he?" I asked, the realization settling in my stomach like lead. "He had Terrence investigated the week you brought him home," Henderson said calmly. He knew about the maxed-out credit cards Terrence was hiding. He knew about the exaggerated college transcripts. He knew Terrence saw you not as a partner, but as a ladder. Otis told me, "If that boy thinks she is poor and still stays, maybe I am wrong. But if he thinks she is rich, he will bleed her dry and leave her husk." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Daddy knew. He watched me struggle, watched me build future tech with my sweat and tears, all to protect me from the very moment I was living right now. He didn't just watch, Nia Henderson said, his voice hardening. Otis was a strategist. He knew that if Terrence ever succeeded, he would try to discard you. So your father bought insurance. He opened the file. Inside were stacks of financial documents, loan agreements, and promissory notes. I saw the logo for Future Tech on the top of the stack. "What is this?" I asked. Over the last 5 years, every time Terrence needed capital to expand, every time he needed a bridge loan to make payroll or buy new servers, he went to a venture capital firm called OW. Ventures, Henderson explained. He thought he was dealing with a faceless conglomerate. He didn't know OW stood for Otis Williams. I stared at the papers. My father funded Future Tech. He bought the debt, Henderson corrected. He didn't buy equity. He bought the liability. Your father owns the notes on Terrence's startup loans. He owns the equipment leases. He owns the operational debt. Sterling stepped forward, tapping a specific document. And he owns the mortgage on the Buckhead mansion. Terrence refinanced 6 months ago to pull out cash for the IPO roadshow. He leveraged the house to the hilt. The bank sold that mortgage to the trust the next day per your father's standing instructions. The room spun. I owned the debt. I owned the loans. I was the bank. Terrence had kicked me out of a house that effectively belonged to me. But why does this matter now? I asked, looking up at Henderson. If he goes public with the IPO, he will pay off the debt. He will be rich. He won't need the loans anymore. Henderson smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth that told me exactly why he was the most feared lawyer in Atlanta. That is the situation, Nia. Terrence is cash poor. He spent everything on appearances on the cars, on the parties on that girl Jasmine. He needs a bridge loan to get to the IPO launch next month. He needs $5 million to cover the underwriter's fees and the marketing blitz. Without it, the IPO fails. The company collapses under the weight of its own overhead. Sterling pulled a fresh document from his printer. It was a loan application. It was dated this morning. "He just applied an hour ago," Sterling said. "He is in the VIP lounge at our Midtown branch right now waiting for approval. He is using the house and the remaining company assets as collateral. He is desperate. If we deny him, he is finished." I looked at the application. I saw Terrence's signature bold and arrogant. I thought about him laughing in the rain. I thought about him telling me I didn't fit the brand. He was begging for money from the very people he had stepped on, and he didn't even know it. "If you deny him, he crashes," Henderson said. "You can foreclose on the house today. You can seize the company assets for non-payment of previous debts. You can destroy him right now, Nia. It is your call. The trust gives you absolute discretion." I touched the cold metal card sitting on the desk. Destroying him now would be easy. It would be satisfying. I could have security throw him out of the bank. I could have the locks changed on the mansion by noon. But that was too fast. That was too merciful. He wanted a brand. He wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to erase me. I didn't want him just broken. I wanted him to know exactly who broke him. I wanted him to build his tower so high that when it fell, the sound would shatter his entire world. I looked at Henderson. I wiped the last tear from my face. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity that felt like armor. "No," I said. Sterling looked confused. "No. You want to approve the loan?" "I want to approve it," I said, my voice steady. "But not under these terms." I pulled the loan application toward me. I picked up a pen from Sterling's desk. "He needs $5 million, I said. "Give it to him. Let him think he has won. Let him think he is invincible. Let him spend it on his brand and his girlfriend. But Mr. Henderson, I want you to rewrite the covenants. Henderson leaned in, his eyes gleaming with interest. What do you have in mind? I want a clause, I said. A demand clause. I want the right to call the full value of the loan, the new 5 million plus, all the historical debt my father bought due in full at any time for any reason with 24 hours notice. And I want a controlling interest provision. If he defaults ownership of the intellectual property, the brand and the voting stock reverts immediately to the lender, not to the bank, to the trust. Henderson let out a low whistle. That is a poison pill, Nia. No sane businessman would sign that. It is suicide. He will sign it, I said. Because he is arrogant, because he thinks he is untouchable, and because he is desperate. He thinks this is just a formality to get to the IPO. He doesn't read the fine print. He proved that when he tricked me into signing the quitclaim deed. I looked at the picture of my father in the open wallet. Don't tell him it is me, I ordered. Keep the lender anonymous. Use a shell company name, something generic. Let him think it is just corporate finance. Sterling looked at Henderson. Can we do that? Henderson picked up his briefcase. He stood up, looking at me with a pride that made my chest ache. We can do whatever the client wants, Arthur, and I believe the client just decided to go hunting. Henderson took the file. I will draft the papers immediately. We will present them to him within the hour. He will sign. And when he does, you will own him body and soul. I stood up. I smoothed down my dirty shirt. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like the CEO of my own life. Do it, I said. Give him the money. Let him have his party. Because when the bill comes due, I want to be the one holding the receipt. The transformation began the moment I walked out of the bank. It wasn't just about buying new clothes or getting a haircut. It was about shedding the skin of the woman Terrence had convinced me I was. That Nia, the one who apologized for taking up space, who wore shapeless dresses to hide her curves, because Patricia said they were too much, who cooked and cleaned and shrank herself, she was gone. In her place was something sharper, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. I started with my living situation. Henderson had offered to help me find a discreet place, but I didn't want discreet. I wanted a view. I wanted to see my enemy. Using a shell company Henderson set up, I purchased the penthouse directly across the street from the Future Tech headquarters. It was a glass box in the sky, modern and cold, with a direct line of sight into Terrence's corner office. I stood on my balcony that first night, watching the tiny figure of my husband pacing back and forth, probably stressing over the loan application he had just submitted. It gave me a thrill I hadn't expected. I was the ghost in the machine, the unseen hand guiding his fate, and he didn't even know I was watching. Next came the physical transformation. I went to a salon in Buckhead, not the one Patricia went to, but a place known for edgy, high-fashion cuts. I told the stylist to cut it all off. No more bun, no more hiding. When she finished, I stared at myself in the mirror. My hair was short, a sleek, textured pixie cut that highlighted my cheekbones and eyes. I looked fierce. I looked like money. Then the wardrobe. I didn't go to the department stores where Tiffany shopped for labels to plaster across her chest. I went to a boutique in Phipps Plaza that catered to old money and European royalty. I bought structured blazers in deep emerald and navy silk trousers that flowed like water and heels that clicked with authority. Everything was tailored to within an inch of its life. No logos, no flash, just impeccable quality that whispered power instead of screaming it. When I walked down the street, people didn't look past me anymore. They moved out of my way. But the most important part of the transformation was the plan. I sat in my new living room surrounded by monitors displaying stock tickers and real estate listings mapping out Terrence's destruction. It would have been easy to sign the divorce papers and walk away with a settlement. Henderson had told me I could probably get a few million if I fought. But a few million wasn't enough. Not after he erased me, not after he humiliated me. I didn't want his money, I wanted his legacy. I wanted him to lose the one thing he loved more than himself, his image. I decided not to file for divorce yet. Let him think I was stalling. Let him think I was broken and hiding. The longer we were married, the more leverage I had. And more importantly, I needed to be his wife when the loan covenants kicked in. I needed to be the one standing next to him when the house of cards fell, so I could be the one to push the final wall down. I spent the next 3 days setting traps. I used the resources of the Black Trust to quietly buy up the debt of his suppliers. I acquired the parking garage where he kept his precious sports cars. I even bought the catering company he used for his office lunches. Everywhere he turned, he was paying me. Every time he swiped his card, he was feeding the beast that would eventually eat him. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tiffany. I looked at the screen, a smile curling the corners of my mouth. Nia, are you done crying in the gutter yet? We need the storage room cleared out. Terrence wants to turn it into a wine cellar for the IPO party. Come get your junk, or I am throwing it in the dumpster. If you clean it out fast, maybe I can convince Terrence to let you sign the papers without a lawyer present so you don't embarrass yourself further. I laughed. It was a genuine dark laugh. They still thought I was the old Nia. They thought I was desperate to sign, desperate to please. They had no idea I held the deed to the very house she was standing in. I typed back, my fingers flying across the screen. Sure, Tiffany. I will be there tomorrow at noon. I will clean it out. I hit send and stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked across the street at Terrence's office. The lights were still on. He was working late, probably counting the money from the loan I had just approved. I wasn't going back to clean. I was going back to inspect my property and to plant the final seeds of their destruction. I checked my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back wore a silk blouse that cost more than Tiffany's wedding ring. Her hair was sharp. Her eyes were cold. Get ready, Tiffany, I whispered to the glass. You wanted a maid. You are about to get a landlord. I turned away from the window and picked up my purse. It was time to go home. The iron gates of the Buckhead estate swung open, but this time I did not drive through them in a luxury SUV. I walked up the long, winding driveway in my sensible flats and a nondescript beige trench coat, carrying a plastic bucket of cleaning supplies. It was a prop, of course, but a necessary one. To get what I needed, I had to become exactly what they expected to see: the broken ex-wife, the desperate woman, the help. I let myself in through the side door, the code still unchanged. The house smelled of expensive lilies and arrogance. I could hear voices drifting from the formal living room, the high, shrill laughter of Tiffany and the murmuring approval of my mother-in-law, Patricia. I walked softly down the hallway, my heart beating a steady, cold rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't afraid. Fear had evaporated the moment I saw my bank balance. Now I was just focused. I found them in the living room, surrounded by garment bags and tissue paper. It looked like a boutique had exploded. Tiffany was standing on a velvet ottoman, wearing a shimmering gold gown that was cut too low and fit too tight. Patricia was on her knees, pinning the hem, looking up at Tiffany with the adoration she had never once shown me. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Tiffany said, catching my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. She didn't turn around. She just watched me in the glass, a smirk playing on her lips. "I thought you might have drowned in the gutter by now." "I came for my things," I said, keeping my voice low and submissive. "You said if I cleaned out the storage room, Terrence would sign the papers." "That is the deal," Patricia said, struggling to stand up. Her knees popped audibly. "But since you are here, we have a little emergency." Tiffany stepped in a puddle of oil in the garage. "Her favorite Louboutins are ruined. Since you are already dressed for manual labor, be a dear and scrub them for her." She pointed to a pair of red-bottomed heels discarded on the white rug. A dark, greasy smear marred the pristine leather of the left shoe. I stared at the shoes. A week ago, this indignity would have made me cry. Now I saw it for what it was, an opportunity. "Of course," I said, picking up the shoes. I will need to take these to the laundry room to use the proper solvent. Do not ruin them, Nia Tiffany snapped. Those shoes cost more than your life is worth right now. I nodded and backed out of the room. As soon as I was out of their sight, I moved fast. I didn't go to the laundry room. I went straight to the guest wing where Tiffany had set up camp. Her bedroom door was open, clothes strewn everywhere. I pulled a tiny, high-powered listening device from my pocket, something Henderson's security team had provided. I stuck it under the heavy oak nightstand deep in the corner where the maids never dusted. It was invisible. Then I sprinted silently down the hall to Terrence's home office. The door was closed, but not locked. He was arrogant enough to believe he was untouchable in his own home. I slipped inside. The room smelled of his cologne and stale scotch. I moved to the large mahogany desk and stuck the second bug directly under the lip of the desk, right where he sat to make his calls. I was about to leave when I heard the front door open. Heavy footsteps echoed on the marble. Terrence was home. I froze. I couldn't get back to the laundry room without crossing his path. I had to improvise. I grabbed a microfiber cloth from my bucket and started furiously polishing the bookshelf, hunching my shoulders, making myself small. Terrence walked in, loosening his tie. He looked flushed, manic, high on the adrenaline of the $5 million loan I had just secretly approved. He stopped when he saw me. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he said, walking over to his desk and pouring himself a drink. "If it isn't the ghost of Christmas past. I didn't think you had the guts to come back here." "I am just cleaning, Terrence," I said, keeping my eyes on the floor. "I just want my boxes." He laughed, taking a swig of scotch. "Look at you, scrubbing my shelves. It suits you, Nia. It really does. You know, I was telling Jasmine just an hour ago that some people are born to lead and some are born to serve. You have always had a servant's heart. It is pathetic, really. That slave mentality, you just can't shake it, can you? Even when you are free, you come back to the master's house to clean." The insult was vile, designed to strip away my humanity. He wanted me to break. He wanted me to scream so he could call me crazy. Instead, I gripped the cloth tighter and polished a spot on the wood until it gleamed. "You are right, Terrence," I whispered. "I just want to be useful." "Good girl," he sneered. "Now get out of my office. I have important calls to make. Big business, things you wouldn't understand." He sat down at his desk right above the bug I had just planted. He waved his hand at me as if shooing a fly. I scurried out, heading straight for the storage closet under the stairs where the safe was hidden. It was a wall safe concealed behind a panel of circuit breakers. Terrence rarely used it. He preferred to keep his cash in his pocket and his secrets on his phone. But I knew what was in there. The tax ledgers, the off-book accounts, the records of every bribe, every kickback, every dollar he had skimmed from the company before the IPO. He kept them there because he thought I was too stupid to understand them, and he was too paranoid to keep them at the office. I knelt in the dark closet. I stared at the keypad. He hadn't changed the code. He was too lazy. It was the date we incorporated Future Tech. 10-01. I punched in the numbers. The light turned green. The lock clicked. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, stacked neatly next to a pile of cash, were 3 black leather-bound notebooks. The cooked books, he jokingly called them when we were first starting out, back when the fraud was small. Now they were a federal indictment waiting to happen. I grabbed the notebooks and shoved them into the bottom of my cleaning bucket, covering them with dirty rags and bottles of bleach. I closed the safe and scrambled backward just as Tiffany yelled from the living room, "Nia, where are my shoes? I have a fitting in 10 minutes." I grabbed the bucket and ran to the laundry room, splashing some water on the shoes to make it look like I had tried. I walked back into the living room, head bowed, holding the shoes out like an offering. "Here," I said. "I did my best." Tiffany snatched them from me. "You missed a spot," she said, examining them closely. "Useless. Absolutely useless. Just take your trash and get out. I am tired of looking at your sad face." Patricia didn't even look up from her sewing. "Make sure you lock the service door on your way out, Nia. We don't want any riffraff getting in. I walked to the back door, the heavy bucket digging into my palm. The weight of the notebooks hidden inside was the most comforting thing I had ever felt. I am leaving now, I said, my hand on the doorknob. Don't let the door hit you, Terrence yelled from his office. I stepped out into the cool evening air. I walked down the driveway past the manicured hedges and the fountain. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I reached my car, the new discreet sedan Henderson had arranged for me, and placed the bucket on the passenger seat. I sat behind the wheel and looked at the house one last time. They were in there trying on dresses and drinking scotch, celebrating a victory that was already hollow. They thought I was a servant. They thought I was a slave to their whims. I patted the notebooks beside me. I wasn't a servant. I was the executioner, and I had just sharpened the blade. I started the engine and drove away, the first recording from the bug in Terrence's office already streaming to my phone. Hello, Jasmine? Terrence's voice crackled through the speaker, clear as day. Baby, the loan came through, 5 million. We are going to be rich. And the best part, that idiot ex-wife of mine just polished my desk while I signed the papers. She has no clue. I smiled at the road ahead. Oh, Terrence, you have no idea. The silence of my penthouse was heavy, broken only by the hum of the high-tech server rack Henderson had installed in my living room and the crackle of static in my noise-canceling headphones. I sat in the dark, bathed in the blue glow of 3 monitors, watching the audio waveforms spike and fall. Across the street, the lights of the future tech building were blazing, a monument to my husband's ego. But inside my ears, the real story was unfolding, transmitted directly from the device I had planted under the oak nightstand in the guest wing of the mansion. I had expected to hear Tiffany complaining to her friends. I had expected to hear her mocking my clothes or plotting how to spend Terrence's money on another pair of shoes. What I heard instead made my blood run cold and then strangely boil with a new, focused intensity. The audio feed from the guest bedroom was crisp. I heard the rustle of silk sheets and the clinking of glasses. Then a man's voice. It wasn't Terrence. It wasn't her husband, my brother-in-law Michael. It was a voice I recognized from industry galas, a voice that belonged to Terrence's fiercest competitor, Julian Thorne, the CEO of Nexus Systems. You have the files, Julian asked, his voice low and urgent. I heard the sound of a zipper, then the thud of a hard drive being placed on a wooden surface. Everything is there, Tiffany replied, her voice lacking its usual shrillness. It was calm, calculating. The source code for the new compression algorithm, the user data from the beta test, and the entire investor list for the IPO. It is all on that drive. I sat up straight, pressing the headphones tighter to my ears. She wasn't just cheating on Michael. She was committing corporate espionage. She was selling Future Tech, my company, the company I built, to the competition. Is it encrypted? Julian asked. Please. Tiffany scoffed. Terrence uses his birthday for everything. I guessed his admin password on the second try. He is so busy playing the big shot CEO, he doesn't even notice when I log into the mainframe from the guest Wi-Fi. I watched the waveforms spike as Julian laughed. He is going to be ruined when we launch this feature next week. Nexus will crush his IPO valuation before he even rings the opening bell. That is the plan, isn't it? Tiffany purred. But we need to time this perfectly. You cannot leak the tech yet. Why not? Julian asked. I want to bury him now, because he hasn't gotten the cash yet, Tiffany said. And this was the moment, the sentence that sealed her fate. That idiot Terrence thinks he is a genius. He thinks he charmed some anonymous lender into giving him $5 million. He is walking around the house like he is the king of Atlanta. He has no idea he is signing his death warrant. I leaned in, my heart hammering against my ribs. Wait until the wire transfer hits the Future Tech operating account? Tiffany continued, her voice dripping with venomous greed. Once that 5 million lands, I have access to the accounts through the shell company I set up for the event planning vendor. I will invoice him for $3 million in consulting fees and venue deposits. He will sign it without looking because he is too busy staring at his reflection. Once the money is in my offshore account, I will hand over the rest of the code to you, and we can both watch him burn." She laughed a sound that was pure ice. "I am going to gut him, Julian. I am going to leave him with nothing but that cheap little mistress and a mountain of debt. And then you and I are going to Paris." I took the headphones off and set them on the desk, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. Tiffany wasn't just a mean girl. She was a predator. She had played the long game, embedding herself in the family, feeding on their insecurities, all while plotting to dismantle the legacy my father's money had funded. And Terrence, my husband, the man who told me I lacked vision. He was so blinded by his own arrogance, so obsessed with his image and his new girlfriend, that he didn't see the snake sleeping in his own guest room. He was letting her steal the very lifeline I had just extended to him. For a moment, a flicker of instinct rose up, the instinct to save him. I could call him right now. I could play the recording. I could warn him that his sister-in-law was sleeping with the enemy and planning to embezzle the loan I had just approved. If I warned him, he might stop her. He might save the company. He might even thank me. I looked at the monitor, showing the live feed from the bug in Terrence's office. He was there sitting at his desk, a glass of scotch in his hand. Jasmine was sitting on the edge of the desk, her legs crossed, laughing at something he said. I put the headphones back on and switched the channel to his office feed. "Can you believe she actually cleaned the shelves?" Terrence was saying, his voice slurring slightly. "She was on her hands and knees, Jasmine, scrubbing. It was pathetic. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered she is just dead weight. Now that we have this 5 million, we can really start living. I am going to buy you that bracelet we saw at Phipps. The diamond cuff. You are so good to me, baby," Jasmine cooed. "But are you sure about the loan terms? I saw the paperwork." That demand clause looked scary. Terrence laughed a sound of pure hubris. "It is just boilerplate legalese, babe. Standard corporate finance stuff. The lender is some shell corporation called OW Ventures. Probably some old white guys in a boardroom who just want their interest payments. They don't know who they are dealing with. I am going to turn that 5 million into 50 million in 6 months. They won't call the loan. They will be begging to invest more." I took the headphones off again. He was mocking me. He was mocking the old white guys, who were actually his black father-in-law's ghost. He was planning to spend my father's money on diamonds for his mistress, while Tiffany planned to steal the rest of it to run away with his rival. The choice crystallized in my mind. It was cold and hard as a diamond. I would not save him. Saving him would require me to step in. It would require me to reveal my hand too early. It would mean fighting his battles for him just like I had done for 10 years. If I saved him from Tiffany, he would just go back to being the same arrogant, ungrateful man he always was. He would think he escaped because he was smart, not because I was merciful. No, he needed to fall. And he needed to fall all the way to the bottom. I picked up my phone and dialed Henderson. It was late, but I knew he would answer. "Ah." His gravelly voice came through the line. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect, Elias," I said, staring at the waveform of Tiffany's voice on my screen. "I need you to prepare the wire transfer for the $5 million. You want to proceed?" he asked, surprised. "Even after what you found in the safe?" "Especially after what I found," I said. "Send the money tomorrow morning. Make sure it hits his account by noon. And Elias." "Yes. I need you to contact the fraud division at the FBI. I have a tip for them regarding corporate espionage and embezzlement. But tell them to wait." "Wait for what?" "Wait until the money moves," I said. "I want them to catch her with her hands in the cookie jar. I want the transaction to clear. I want the invoice to be paid. I want the paper trail to be absolute." I see Henderson said, his tone shifting from lawyer to co-conspirator. "You are using the loan as bait." "Exactly," I said. "Let Tiffany think she has won. Let her transfer the funds. Let her hand over the hard drive to Julian." Because when she does, she isn't just stealing from Terrence. She is stealing from the Black Trust, and that makes it a federal crime with a mandatory minimum sentence. And Terrence Henderson asked, "What happens to him when the money vanishes?" I looked at the screen one last time. Terrence was kissing Jasmine, completely oblivious to the knife hovering over his back. "When the money vanishes," I said, "I will exercise the demand clause. He will be in default. He will have no cash, no intellectual property, and no friends. He will come to me. Not because he loves me, but because I will be the only person left holding the deed to his life." "Very well," Henderson said. "The wire goes out at 9 a.m. I hung up. I looked at the audio files on my screen, the evidence of Tiffany's treachery and Terrence's foolishness. I saved them to 3 different cloud servers. I wasn't the maid anymore. I wasn't the wife. I was the architect of their ruin. "Sleep well, Tiffany," I whispered to the empty room. "Enjoy your victory lap. Because tomorrow, the trap snaps shut." 3 days later, I sat in my penthouse, a cup of Earl Grey tea steaming in my hand, watching the live feed from the camera hidden in Terrence's office. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except I was the one controlling the traffic lights. Across the street in the glass tower that my father's trust owned, Terrence was pacing. His suit jacket was off, his sleeves were rolled up, and the confident stride of the CEO was gone, replaced by the frantic, jerky movements of a trapped animal. The trap had sprung exactly as I had designed it. 24 hours ago, the $5 million wire transfer had hit the Future Tech operating account. 12 hours ago, just as Henderson and I predicted, a shell company registered to a generic P.O. box in the Caymans controlled by Tiffany had invoiced Future Tech for $3.2 million in emergency consulting and venue reservation fees. Terrence, too busy test driving a new Porsche, had digitally countersigned the transfer without reading the details. And then the hammer dropped. I watched on the screen as Terrence's chief financial officer, a nervous man named David, who had always been too timid to stand up to Terrence, walked into the office. He looked like he was walking to the gallows. "Terrence," David said, his voice trembling even through the audio feed. "We have a problem, a big one." Terrence didn't stop pacing. "What is it now?" "David? Did the caterer cancel the champagne fountain? Just throw money at them. We are liquid. We are rich." "We aren't liquid," David stammered. "I just tried to run payroll for the engineering team." The transaction bounced. Terrence stopped. He turned slowly, a look of genuine confusion on his face. "What do you mean it bounced?" "We have $5 million in that account. I saw the wire confirmation myself." "We did," David said, sweating. "But $3 million went out this morning to a vendor called Elite Solutions. And the remaining balance—" "It is frozen! Frozen!" Terrence roared, slamming his hand onto the desk. "Who froze it?" the lender, David whispered. "OW Ventures. They issued a stop-loss order 45 minutes ago. They cited irregular financial activity and breach of covenant. They have locked the operating account, the reserve account, and the line of credit." "Terrence, we have zero access to cash." I took a sip of my tea, savoring the warmth. Henderson had sent the freeze notice the second the money left for Tiffany's account. Under the terms of the new loan, the terms Terrence hadn't bothered to read, any unauthorized transfer over $500,000 triggered an automatic freeze and an immediate audit. "Fix it!" Terrence screamed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Call them, tell them it is a mistake. Tell them I am Terrence King." "I tried," David said, shrinking back. "Their legal department said the account is under legal review. They said if we want to contest it, we have to file a motion in court. That could take weeks. Terrence payroll is due tomorrow. If we miss it, the engineers will walk. The IPO is in 2 weeks. If the staff leaves, the valuation goes to zero." "Get out!" Terrence yelled, picking up a heavy crystal paperweight and hurling it at the wall. "Get out and fix it!" David fled the room. Terrence stood there, chest heaving, staring at the dent in the drywall. He ran his hands over his face, dragging his skin down, looking suddenly aged and exhausted. Then his office phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. He snatched it up. What he barked. I watched his face pale. It was the building management office, my management office. Mr. King, the voice on the speakerphone said, cool and professional. We are calling regarding your lease. The rent for this month and the arrears for the last 3 months were due by noon today. The automatic withdrawal was declined. I will write you a check, Terrence snapped. Just give me a day. I am afraid we cannot do that, the property manager said. Per your lease agreement, failure to pay by the deadline constitutes a default. We have initiated eviction proceedings. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises or the sheriff will be contacted to lock the doors. Terrence slammed the phone down so hard I thought it would break. He sank into his leather chair, the chair he thought made him a king. He was being squeezed from every side. No cash, no staff, no office. And somewhere in the back of his mind he had to be wondering where that $3 million had gone, but his ego wouldn't let him see the thief sleeping in his own guest room. He pulled out his cell phone. I watched him scroll through his contacts. He called Tiffany. I switched my audio feed to listen. Tiffany, where are you? He demanded. I need you to transfer some money back from the event account. The bank made a mistake. I can't right now. Terrence. Tiffany's voice came through sounding breezy and distant. I am at the spa. The reception is terrible. Just figure it out. You are the genius, right? She hung up. I smiled. She was already cutting the cord. He dialed another number. Jasmine. Babe, I need a favor, he said, his voice dropping to a desperate wheedle. Can you float me alone just for 48 hours? The bank is having a glitch. There was a pause. Then Jasmine's voice cold and sharp. You want to borrow money? Terrence, you told me you were worth millions. My financial advisor said Future Tech is a gold mine. Are you broke? It is just a glitch, he shouted. Call me when the glitch is fixed, she said. I don't date projects. Click. He was alone. Completely, utterly alone. He put his head in his hands. I could see his shoulders shaking. Was he crying, or was he laughing at the absurdity of it all? Then he sat up. A look of desperate resolve hardened his features. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a file. I zoomed in with the camera. It was the divorce settlement draft, the one he had tried to force me to sign. He grabbed his phone again and dialed a number I knew by heart. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Hello, I said, keeping my voice calm, neutral. Naya, where are you? Terrence demanded. He didn't sound like a husband. He sounded like a man drowning who would climb on top of his own mother to breathe. I am busy, Terrence. What do you want? I need you to sign the papers, he said. Today. Right now. I told you I am reviewing them with my lawyer. We don't have time for lawyers, he yelled. Look, Nia. I am trying to be generous here. I will give you the $10,000. Cash. But you have to sign today. And I need you to sign a release for the jewelry. The jewelry, I asked, my blood running cold. Your mother's jewelry, he said, impatient. The vintage pearls, the diamond brooch, the things you left in the safe. They are marital assets, Nia. I had them appraised. They are worth $50,000. I am willing to let you have the cash value, but I need to liquidate them immediately to cover some closing costs for the house transfer. He was going to sell my mother's jewelry, the only things I had left of her. He was going to pawn my legacy to pay for his mistakes. You want to sell my mother's brooch? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. It is just stuff. Nia, he screamed. Why are you so sentimental? I need the cash flow. Stop being selfish for once in your life and help me. Selfish. The word hung in the air. He locked me out in the rain. He stole my company. He cheated on me. And I was the selfish one. Okay, Terrence, I said. I will sign. You will. The relief in his voice was pathetic. Good. Good girl. Come to the office. No, I said. I am not coming to that office. I don't want to see you there. Then where? Just tell me where. Tonight, I said. At the Celestial Gala. The charity auction, Terence asked, confused. Why there? Because we need to keep up appearances, don't we? I said smoothly. If we are divorcing, let's do it with some dignity. Meet me at the gala, bring the papers, and bring the jewelry. If you give me the jewelry, I will sign away my rights to the house and the company. You want the jewelry? He sounded suspicious. It is all I want, Terence. You can keep the rest. Just bring my mother's things to the gala. We can sign the papers in the VIP lounge. Fine, he snapped. Fine, I will bring them. But you better not pull any stunts, Nia. I don't have time for your drama. The gala starts at 7. Be there. I will be there, I promised. I hung up the phone. I looked across the street one last time. Terence was stuffing papers into his briefcase, looking manic and sweaty. He thought he had found a lifeline. He thought he was going to sell my past to buy his future. He had no idea that the Celestial Gala wasn't just a party. It was the premier event of the Atlanta social season. The mayor would be there, the governor, the titans of industry, the very people he needed to impress to save his IPO. And I wasn't going as his wife. I wasn't going as his victim. I was going as the woman who owned the building he was standing in. I picked up my phone and called Henderson. Elias, I said, it is time for Phase 3. Get the team ready. And make sure the police are on standby at the gala. Police, Henderson asked. What for? Because I said watching Terence rush out of his office tonight, someone is going to try to sell stolen property, and I want to make sure everyone sees it. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a galaxy of crystal chandeliers, silk draperies, and Atlanta's elite. It was the Celestial Gala, the night where the city's power players came to outbid each other for charity and social status. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Waiters in white gloves moved silently through the crowd, offering flutes of champagne that cost more than my monthly grocery budget used to be. Terence and Tiffany stood near the entrance, trying too hard to look like they belonged. Terence was wearing a tuxedo that was a little too shiny, his smile a little too wide, as he scanned the room for anyone important enough to talk to. Tiffany was draped in a silver gown that was clearly rented, her arm linked possessively through his. She was scanning the room too, but not for business contacts. She was looking for validation. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be envied. Look at them, Tiffany whispered loudly, gesturing with her champagne glass toward a group of actual billionaires near the bar. They don't know what is coming. Once we get through tonight, we will be running this city. Terence adjusted his cufflinks nervously, patting the breast pocket where he had stashed the divorce papers. We just need to get Nia to sign. Once she signs, the cash is ours. We pay off the debts, launch the IPO, and then we are untouchable. She will sign, Tiffany said, rolling her eyes. She is desperate. She probably walked here. Just get it over with so we can enjoy the party. I want to meet the mayor. I watched them from the shadows of the VIP entrance, a small private smile playing on my lips. They looked like children playing dress-up in a world they didn't understand. I stepped into the light. I was not wearing a maid's uniform tonight. I was wearing a custom-designed gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged every curve and pooled on the floor like liquid night. My hair was styled in sleek modern waves. Around my neck, I wore a single massive sapphire pendant, a piece from my mother's collection that Terence didn't even know existed because I had never trusted him enough to show it to him. I walked toward them, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor. Heads turned as I passed. People stopped talking. The air in the room seemed to shift, drawn toward the new gravitational pull I had created. Tiffany saw me first. Her eyes widened, not with recognition, but with shock. She nudged Terence so hard he spilled his drink. Terence looked up. He froze. For a second, he didn't even know who I was. He saw a wealthy, powerful woman walking toward him, and his instinct was to charm her. Then his brain caught up with his eyes. His jaw dropped. Nia, he choked out. Well, look at you, Tiffany sneered, recovering quickly. Did you rob a costume shop? Or did you spend your severance pay on a rental dress? You look ridiculous. I stopped in front of them. I didn't say a word. I just looked at them. I let my gaze travel over Terrence's sweaty forehead, over Tiffany's cheap jewelry, over the fear hiding behind their arrogance. "What are you doing here?" Terrence hissed, looking around nervously to see if anyone was watching. "This is a black tie event, Naya. Tickets are $5,000 a plate. You can't afford to breathe the air in here." "I am here to sign Terrence," I said, my voice cool and calm. "Remember, you invited me. I told you to meet me in the lobby, not crash the ballroom. Tiffany, call security. Get this trash out of here before she embarrasses us in front of the mayor." Tiffany raised her hand, snapping her fingers at a passing security guard. "Hey, you! Yes, you. We have a crasher. This woman is trespassing. Remove her immediately." The guard, a burly man with an earpiece, walked over. He looked at Tiffany, then at Terrence, and finally at me. His face softened into a look of profound respect. "Good evening, Ms. Williams," he said, bowing his head slightly. "It is an honor to have you with us tonight. The board is waiting for you at the head table." Tiffany's mouth fell open. "What, do you know who she is?" "She is a nobody. She is his ex-wife. She used to clean his house." The guard ignored her. He spoke into his wrist microphone. "Eagle 1 to base. The chairwoman has arrived. Escort her to the dais." Chairwoman Terrence squeaked. Before they could process what was happening, the crowd parted. A group of distinguished men and women, the gala committee, the city council members, the people. Terrence had been dying to meet all night, walked toward us. Leading them was none other than Arthur Sterling, the bank manager, looking dashing in a tuxedo. "Ms. Williams," Sterling said, extending his hand. "We were worried you wouldn't make it. The auction can't start without you." I took his hand. "Thank you, Arthur. I wouldn't miss it." Terrence grabbed my arm. "What is going on, Nia? Who are these people? Why are they talking to you?" Sterling looked at Terrence's hand on my arm. His expression turned icy. "Remove your hand from the chairwoman, Mr. King," Sterling said quietly, "or I will have you removed from the building." Terrence snatched his hand back as if he had been burned. "Chairwoman. Chairwoman of what?" "Of the Otis Williams Charitable Trust," Sterling said, "the primary sponsor of tonight's gala, and the owner of the building we are currently standing in." Terrence stared at me. His eyes were wide, glassy with confusion. "Otis Williams. Your dad, the barber." "My father was a man of many talents." "Terrence," I said, smoothing my gown. "And one of them was investing. He bought this hotel 30 years ago. You own the Ritz?" Tiffany whispered, her face pale. "I own the land," I corrected, "and the trust owns the hotel. And tonight, I am the guest of honor." I turned back to Sterling. "Shall we? We shall," Sterling said, offering me his arm. I walked away from them, leaving them standing in the middle of the ballroom floor, looking small and insignificant. As we moved toward the VIP table, the one raised on a platform overlooking the entire room, I heard Tiffany's voice, shrill and desperate, trying to rationalize what had just happened. "Don't worry, Terrence," she hissed. "It is a scam. It has to be. She probably slept with that old guy Sterling. That is how she got in. She is just a gold digger who got lucky. We still have the loan. We still have the IPO. She is nothing." I sat down at the head table right next to the mayor. I picked up the heavy linen napkin and placed it on my lap. I looked out over the sea of faces. I saw Terrence and Tiffany arguing in the corner, their panic rising. They were right about one thing. I was nothing like the woman they thought they knew. I signaled the waiter. "Champagne, please," I said. "And bring a bottle to Mr. King and his guest. They are going to need a drink for what comes next." The lights dimmed. The auctioneer stepped up to the podium. The spotlight hit the stage. It was time for the main event. And Terrence was about to find out that the price of admission was everything he had. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the ballroom, a rhythmic chant of numbers and greed that seemed to hypnotize the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the highlight of the evening, lot number 42. A rare vintage 1955 Patek Philippe pocket watch in 18-karat gold. This exquisite timepiece has been graciously donated by Mr. Terence King, a family heirloom passed down through 4 generations of the King family. I watched from the head table as a hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight hit the display case on stage, illuminating the watch. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a King family heirloom. Terence didn't have a family legacy. His grandfather drove a bus in Macon. That watch belonged to Otis Williams. It was the watch my mother had saved for 5 years to buy him for their 10th anniversary. I hadn't seen it since the day my father died. I thought it had been lost in the chaos of the funeral, or perhaps buried with him. But no, Terence had stolen it. He had picked the pockets of a dead man and hoarded it like a dragon, waiting for a moment when he needed quick cash. And now he was selling my father's heart to pay for his IPO. I looked over at Terence. He was beaming, swirling his champagne, playing the part of the benevolent philanthropist. He leaned over to Tiffany, whispering something that made her giggle. They looked so confident. They thought they had pulled off the perfect crime. They had no idea I was sitting 20 feet away, with the serial number of that watch burned into my memory. The bidding will start at $10,000, the auctioneer announced. Do I hear 10,000? 10,000, a man in the back called out. 15, another voice countered. I waited. I let the sharks circle. The price climbed steadily to 50,000. Terence was trying to look bored, but I could see the sweat glistening on his upper lip. He needed this money. Every dollar was a lifeline for his drowning company. 100,000, I said, raising my paddle. My voice was calm, cutting through the murmurs of the room. The auctioneer paused, looking at me with deference. The chairwoman bids $100,000. Do I hear 110? Terence's head snapped toward me. His eyes narrowed. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He realized 2 things simultaneously. First, that I wanted the watch, and second, that he could use my sentimentality to bankrupt me. He nudged Tiffany. She pulled out her phone and tapped out a message. Suddenly, a paddle went up on the far side of the room. It was held by a man I recognized as one of Julian Thorne's associates, a proxy bidder. 150,000, the proxy called out. 200, I countered without hesitation. 250, the proxy shot back. Terence was grinning now. He was practically vibrating with glee. He thought he had me. He thought he was driving up the price, forcing his foolish ex-wife to pay a fortune for a trinket, funneling millions directly into his pocket. He thought he was playing me. 500,000, I said. The room gasped. 500,000 for a watch. It was unheard of. 750, the proxy said clearly, receiving instructions from Tiffany. I looked at Terence. He winked at me. A slow, arrogant wink that said I win. He thought I was emotional. He thought I was desperate to reclaim a piece of my past. He didn't know I was buying evidence. $1 million, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the auctioneer looked stunned. $1 million going, once he stammered. Going twice. Sold to Ms. Nia Williams for $1 million. The gavel banged. The room erupted in applause. Terence stood up, clapping louder than anyone. He walked toward the stage, his arms wide, ready to accept the check, ready to shake hands, ready to bask in the glory of his windfall. He looked at me with a triumphant sneer. "Thank you for your generosity, Nia," he said loudly so the donors nearby could hear. "It warms my heart to see my family's history go to someone who will appreciate it. I will have my team send over the wire instructions." I stood up. I didn't reach for my purse. I didn't reach for a checkbook. I walked past him, ignoring his outstretched hand, and climbed the stairs to the stage. I took the microphone from the stunned auctioneer. "Thank you, Terence," I said. My voice amplified through the speakers, reaching every corner of the ballroom. "But there seems to be a misunderstanding. I am not wiring you any money." The applause died instantly. The room went cold. Terence laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Nia, don't be funny. You won the auction. You have to pay. That is how this works. I turned to the audience. I looked at the mayor. I looked at the investors. I looked at the elite of Atlanta. I am not paying, I said clearly, because you cannot buy what is already yours, and you certainly cannot pay a thief for returning stolen property. A collective gasp ripped through the room. Terrence's face turned the color of ash. That is a lie, he screamed, abandoning his composure. That is my grandfather's watch. You are just bitter. Security. Get her off the stage. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was a notarized affidavit from the original jeweler in Savannah, dated 1985, along with a police report filed 4 years ago when the watch went missing from my father's estate. This is the certificate of authenticity, I read, holding it up. Serial number 84920. Inscribed on the back casing, "To Otis, my love forever, Martha." I turned to the auctioneer. "Open the case, please," read the inscription. The auctioneer looked at Terrence, then at me. He opened the glass case with trembling hands. He picked up the watch and flipped it over. He squinted at the gold. It says, "To Otis, my love forever, Martha," he read into the microphone. The room exploded into whispers. Terrence looked like he was going to vomit. He looked for Tiffany, but she was already inching toward the exit, trying to distance herself from the blast radius. "This item was stolen from the estate of Otis Williams 4 years ago," I announced. "The man standing before you. Mr. Terrence King embezzled it, hid it, and tonight attempted to sell stolen goods across state lines at a charity event. That is not philanthropy. That is a federal crime." I looked toward the back of the room. Henderson raised his hand. That was the signal. The double doors swung open. 4 officers from the Atlanta Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit marched in. They weren't wearing tuxedos. They were wearing badges and grim expressions. They walked straight down the center aisle, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. Mr. King, the lead detective, said, stepping onto the stage, "We need to take possession of this evidence, and we have a few questions regarding the provenance of this item and several other assets listed in your IPO disclosure." Terrence backed away, his hands raised. "This is a mistake. She is lying. She planted it. I am a CEO. You can't do this to me here." I stepped down from the podium and stood next to him. I leaned in close so only he could hear. "I told you, Terrence," I whispered. "You wanted a brand image. Now you have one." The officers confiscated the watch, sealing it in an evidence bag. They didn't handcuff him yet. That was too good for this moment. But they escorted him off the stage, guiding him firmly toward a side room for interrogation. The humiliation was total. The mayor turned his back on him. The investors he had been wooing all night were already on their phones calling their lawyers to pull their funding. I watched him go, a small, broken man in a shiny tuxedo. I looked at the empty spot where the watch had been. I didn't have the watch back yet, but I had something better. I had the truth. I walked back to my table. Sterling poured me a fresh glass of champagne. "To justice," he said softly. "To Otis," I replied. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. But the night wasn't over. Terrence was ruined socially, but he still had the company. He still had the house. And tomorrow morning I was going to take those too. The meeting was set. The shareholders were waiting, and the chairwoman had one last order of business to attend to. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Future Tech conference room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but it did nothing to warm the icy atmosphere inside. Around the long mahogany table sat the board of directors, their faces pale and drawn. At the head of the table, Terrence looked like a man who had not slept in a week. His tie was loosened, his eyes were bloodshot, and the manic energy that usually fueled him had curdled into pure panic. The company was bleeding out. The accounts were frozen, the staff was threatening to walk, and the IPO that was supposed to make him a king was now an anchor dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. He checked his watch for the 10th time in a minute. "Where are they?" he snapped at David, his CFO. "You said the angel investor was coming at 9. If we don't get that capital injection by noon, the servers go dark." "We are done, David. Done." David wiped sweat from his forehead. "They are here, Terrence. Security just radioed up. They are in the elevator." Terrence straightened his jacket, running a hand over his hair, trying to summon the ghost of his old charisma. Okay. Everyone look sharp. This is our Hail Mary. We need to sell them on the vision. Forget the numbers. Sell the dream." The double doors to the conference room swung open. Terrence put on his best smile, stepping forward with his hand extended, ready to charm whoever walked through that door. "Welcome to Future Tech," he began, his voice booming. "I am so glad you could—" His voice died in his throat. His hand dropped to his side. He stared at the doorway, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. I didn't walk in alone. I walked in flanked by Elias Henderson, whose presence alone was enough to silence a courtroom, and 2 uniformed officers from the Atlanta Police Department. I was wearing a white power suit, crisp and tailored, a stark contrast to the maid's uniform Terrence had last seen me in at this office. I didn't look at the board members. I looked straight at my husband. Nia, Terrence whispered, blinking as if he were seeing a hallucination. "What are you doing here? This is a closed meeting. Did you come to beg for your job back?" I walked past him, ignoring his question, and pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table, the chairman's seat. I sat down, placed my leather portfolio on the table, and clasped my hands. "I am not here for a job, Terrence," I said, my voice calm and projecting to the back of the room. "And I am certainly not here to beg." "Then get out!" he shouted, his fear turning into aggression. "David, call security. Get her out of here. She is trespassing." David didn't move. He was staring at Henderson, who had just placed a stack of legal documents on the table with a heavy thud. Mr. King Henderson rumbled, his voice deep and authoritative. "You might want to sit down. You are not in a position to give orders anymore." Terrence looked at the police officers, then at Henderson, and finally back at me. A dawn of horror was breaking behind his eyes. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Who is the investor I am?" I said simply. Terrence laughed a high, hysterical sound. You are broke, Nia. I froze your accounts. You are sleeping in your car. Stop playing games." I opened the portfolio. I pulled out the loan agreement he had signed 3 days ago, the one with the poison pill clause he hadn't bothered to read. I slid it down the long table. It stopped perfectly in front of him. "Look at the signature on the lender line, Terrence. OW Ventures. Do you know who owns OW Ventures?" He looked at the paper. He looked at me. "It stands for Otis Williams," I said. "My father. And now me. I own the debt, Terrence. I own the $5 million bridge loan. I own the mortgage on your house. I own the lease on this building. And because you violated the covenants of the loan by attempting to embezzle $3 million to a shell company in the Caymans, I have exercised my right to convert that debt into equity." I stood up, leaning over the table. "You didn't read the fine print, baby. In the event of a default, the lender assumes immediate controlling interest of the company. Voting rights, intellectual property, physical assets, all of it." I looked around the room at the stunned board members. "Gentlemen," I announced, "as the new majority shareholder and primary creditor, I am calling this meeting to order. My first act of business is the immediate termination of the CEO for cause." Terrence fell back into his chair, his legs giving out. "No," he whispered. "That is impossible. You were the help. You cooked the greens. You don't have money." "I have more money than you ever dreamed of, Terrence," I said, cold as ice. "And unlike you, I earned mine by being smart, not by standing on the backs of the people who loved me." "You can't do this," he stammered, looking for an ally in the room. "Tiffany, call. Tiffany. She has money. Her family will buy you out. We will fight this." I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had cornered its prey. Oh, please call Tiffany, I said. In fact, I insisted on it. Bring her in. Let's see if she can save you. Terrence scrambled for his phone, his fingers shaking so hard he dropped it twice. He put it on speaker. Tiffany, he screamed. Get down here. Naya is here. She says she owns the company. Bring the checkbook. We need a buyout. I sat back and waited. The trap was about to close on the second rat. 10 minutes later, Tiffany burst into the conference room. She was wearing a tennis outfit, looking flushed and annoyed, clearly pulled away from a country club lunch. She didn't see the police officers standing in the corner. She only saw Terrence sweating and pale, and me sitting at the head of the table. What is going on? She demanded, hands on her hips. Why are you calling me in the middle of my lesson? And why is she sitting in your chair? Tiffany, thank God! Terrence gasped, running to her. You have to help me. Nia, she tricked me. She owns the debt. She is trying to take the company. You need to call your father. We need emergency capital. Write her a check. Buy her out. Whatever it takes. Tiffany looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She stepped back from Terrence, smoothing her skirt. My father? She asked, a strange, guarded tone in her voice. Terrence, my money is tied up in trusts. You know that. I can't just write a check for millions of dollars on a Tuesday. Stop lying, Tiffany. Terrence yelled, grabbing her shoulders. You told me your family was oil money from Texas. You said you had liquid assets. I need it now. Get your hands off me, she shrieked, shoving him away. I am not giving you a dime. This is your mess. You fix it. I cleared my throat. The sound cut through their bickering like a knife. Actually, Tiffany, I said, picking up a remote control. You couldn't give him a dime if you wanted to, because you don't have it. I pressed a button. The projector screen behind me lowered. A photo appeared on the screen. It was a mugshot. A younger brunette Tiffany looking sullen and angry. This is Tiffany Jenkins, I said to the room. Arrested 5 years ago in Florida for check fraud and identity theft. She isn't an heiress. She is a grifter. Her oil money father is a mechanic in Tampa who hasn't spoken to her in a decade. Tiffany's face went white. She looked at the screen, then at Terrence, who was staring at her with his mouth open. You lied? Terrence whispered. You said you were society. You said we were a power couple. And you believed me because you are a greedy idiot, Tiffany screamed, dropping the act completely. Her voice lost its polished upper-crust accent and slid into something rougher. You were an easy mark, Terrence. You were so desperate to be seen as elite, you didn't even run a background check on your own sister-in-law. I pressed the button again. An audio file began to play over the conference room speakers. It was Tiffany's voice, clear and crisp, talking to Julian Thorne. That idiot Terrence thinks he is a genius. Wait until the wire transfer hits. I will invoice him for $3 million. Once the money is in my offshore account, I will hand over the rest of the code to you. The room was deadly silent. Terrence looked like he had been shot. He looked at Tiffany with a mixture of hatred and heartbreak. You were stealing from me, he rasped. You were sleeping with Julian. I was cashing out, Tiffany yelled. Future Tech is a sinking ship. I was just grabbing a life raft. I nodded to Henderson. He signaled the police officers. They stepped out of the shadows, handcuffs glinting under the fluorescent lights. Tiffany Jenkins, the officer said, stepping forward. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of corporate espionage, wire fraud, and grand larceny, and we have the logs from the bank transfer you attempted yesterday. Tiffany tried to run. She actually bolted for the door, her tennis shoes squeaking on the carpet. But the second officer was faster. He grabbed her arm and spun her around, snapping the cuffs on her wrists. No, she screamed, struggling. You can't do this. I am a Blackwell. I am important. You are a felon, I corrected her calmly. And you are going to prison for a very long time. As they dragged her out, kicking and screaming, she locked eyes with me. You set me up, she hissed. You knew. I watched her go, feeling nothing but a cool sense of completion. One down. I turned back to Terrence. He was standing alone in the middle of the room, trembling. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. His company was gone. His money was gone. His family ally was a criminal. And his wife? His wife was the one holding the gavel. He looked at me, and his knees finally gave out. He sank to the floor right there on the plush carpet of the office he used to rule. Nia, he choked out, tears streaming down his face. Baby, please. I didn't know. She tricked me too. She made me do it. I stood up and walked around the table. I stood over him, looking down at the top of his head. She didn't make you kick me out in the rain, Terrence, I said softly. She didn't make you tell me I was too plain to be your wife. She didn't make you cheat on me for 6 months. You did that. You did that all by yourself, because you thought you were better than me. I was stressed, he blubbered, reaching for the hem of my pants. I didn't mean it. We can fix this. I will fire Jasmine. I will sign whatever you want. Just don't take the company. It is my life. It isn't your life anymore, I said, stepping back out of his reach. It is my asset, and I am liquidating it. Suddenly, the door burst open again. Patricia, my mother-in-law, ran in. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smeared. She must have heard the news from the lobby. She saw her son on the floor weeping and me standing over him. Nia, she cried, rushing over to kneel beside him. What are you doing? How can you be so cruel? We are family. Family. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Family doesn't make you wear a uniform at a birthday party. Patricia, family doesn't tell you to scrub the floor while they eat cake. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. But we took you in. We gave you a life. You gave me nothing. I shouted, my voice finally rising, filling the room with the thunder of 10 years of silence. I gave you everything. I paid your mortgage. When Terrence was broke, I cooked your meals, I cleaned your house, and you treated me like a dog. I took a deep breath, smoothing my blazer. And now I am calling the debt due. Patricia. You remember when you told me I didn't fit the brand? You were right. My brand is ownership. Your brand is eviction. What she whispered. I own the house, Patricia. The mortgage was part of the debt package. I am foreclosing, today. You have 24 hours to get out. You can't, she wailed. That is my home. Where will we go? I don't know, I said, turning my back on them. Maybe you can go to the shelter. I hear they have uniforms there. You'll fit right in. I walked back to the table and picked up my portfolio. Terrence, I said without looking back, your car has been repossessed. The company car is gone. The accounts are empty. I left one thing for you at the front desk. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. What? Money? A check? No, I said. A suitcase. The wet one you threw at me. It has your clothes in it. Good luck, Terrence. It is raining outside. I walked out of the conference room, Henderson falling into step beside me. I heard them wailing behind me, a chorus of regret that came far too late. I walked through the office past the employees who were staring at me with awe and fear. I didn't stop. I walked out of the building into the bright Atlanta sunshine. 1 year later, the afternoon sun was warm on my face as I sat on the bench outside the newly renovated building on Martin Luther King Drive. The sign above the door read, the Otis Williams Center for Black Entrepreneurship. It wasn't a tech company anymore. I had dissolved Future Tech, sold off the assets, and used the capital to build something real. This building, which used to be my father's barbershop, was now an incubator. We provided seed funding, legal counsel, and mentorship to young women from the South Side who had brilliant ideas but no access to capital. We were building a generation of CEOs who looked like me. I watched a group of young girls walking out of the coding camp laughing and talking about algorithms. They walked with their heads high. They knew their worth. Excuse me, ma'am. I looked up. A man was standing there holding a bucket of soapy water and a squeegee. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit with a name patch that was peeling off. He looked old, tired, and broken. It was Terrence. He didn't recognize me at first. I was wearing sunglasses and reading a book. But then I lowered the glasses. He froze. The squeegee dripped dirty water onto his boots. Nia, he whispered. Hello, Terrence, I said calmly. He looked at the building. He looked at my car parked at the curb, a sensible luxury sedan. He looked at his own reflection in the glass he was cleaning. I heard you open this place, he said, his voice raspy. It is nice. Thank you, I said. I am working for the detail shop down the street, he mumbled, gesturing vaguely. Just trying to get back on my feet. It is hard. No one will hire me in tech. The reputation. Yes, I said. Reputations are hard to scrub off. He shifted his weight. Tiffany got 5 years, you know. She is in federal prison. I know, I said. I sent her a postcard. He looked down at his feet. Nia, I miss you. Not the money. Just having someone in my corner. I messed up. I know that now. I looked at him. I searched for any feeling. Anger. Pity, love. There was nothing. Just the indifference you feel for a stranger you pass on the street. You didn't mess up Terrence, I said, standing up. You revealed yourself, and I thank you for that. If you hadn't kicked me out, I never would have found the key. I turned to walk into the center. Wait, he called out. Do you think your father would have forgiven me? I stopped at the door. I looked at the large portrait of Otis Williams hanging in the lobby. He was smiling, his barber shears in his hand. My father was a forgiving man, Terrence, I said, but he was also a businessman, and he knew a bad investment when he saw one. I walked inside and the glass door slid shut between us. I didn't look back to see him washing the windows of the empire I built. I walked to the front desk where a young woman named Keisha was waiting for me. Ms. Williams, the board is ready for you, she said, smiling. Thank you, Keisha, I said. I walked into the meeting, my father's black metal card tucked safely in my pocket, right next to my heart. I had taken back my name. I had taken back my life, and I had built a foundation that no storm could ever wash away. Nia's journey serves as a powerful reminder that true value is never defined by external appearances or the validation of others. While Terrence and Tiffany chased the shallow illusion of status, believing wealth was merely a costume to be worn, Nia's father taught her that real power lies in the foundation, character, ownership, and quiet resilience. This story teaches us that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it is a strategic pause before the checkmate. Ultimately, the greatest revenge isn't just stripping your enemies of their assets, but building a legacy of integrity that they never had the vision to imagine. If you believe that character always outlasts arrogance, hit that like button and share your own story of overcoming betrayal in the comments below.